Howdo! Do you need a router plane but find that they are exorbitantly expensive? You can make your own, you know. Hi, I'm Chris. Welcome to King Bespoke Creations. Today we are going to make a hand router plane. Okay, now if you've searched for one of these, if you fancy having one of these, you can spend anything from 50 quid for a tiny brand new one up to 150 probably plus for the full-size vintage ones that you work with both hands. Today I'm going to make another one of these, maybe slightly more delicate than this, but with a smaller Allen key. So this is a 10mm Allen key that's in here, so it's good for clearing off fairly large chunks. I'm going to make one using a 5 or a 6mm Allen key for some slightly more delicate work. So let's see how to do it. So lying around the workshop I found this 5.5mm Allen key. Bear in mind that it won't necessarily be 5.5mm when you finish, because we're going to go with that thickness. You can see that's just over 6. Now we can grind these edges down to make it more precise if you want to. So this being a 10mm bit, the width on here, even after I've ground it, is slightly more than 10mm. I found a roll bolt that's got a loop on the end. Get rid of that bit, and then put a wing nut on the end, and that's what's going to hold it in place at the back. But before we go grinding off any Allen keys, we need to find a chunk of wood that we're going to use. Now you're better off with a hardwood rather than using pine. As much as pine will still work, it won't last as long, and a hardwood will actually then glide over the top of whatever else you're working on with a little bit better. Pine will tend to be a little bit stickier because it's softer. So I've got this chunk of kitchen worktop, and I'm going to use this strip along here. I'm going to make it relatively wide, so we've got a fairly flat base. I'm going to cut off 6 or 7 inches of this. Right, so what do we need to be doing? Well, we can see we need a hole all the way down the middle for the Allen key to go through. So let's get the eye bolt that we've got here to make sure that we've got enough thread poking out the back, something like that. And I'm going to use a 35mm Forstner bit to just drill that hole all the way through the middle of there. So something like there. I'm going to put that in. There's a dot, so I know exactly where that one's going to go. So you can see I've also put a hole in the front of this as well. That's mainly for visibility. So as I look down here as I'm using the piece, I can see exactly what's going on underneath, and I can see what's going on with that plain blade as it goes through. So we need to cut that off as well. So that's going to happen on the front of there. So we're going to cut through like that, and we'll do that after cutting this one out. And then lastly, it's drilling a hole through the back for that thread to fit all the way through. To the drilling station! That is now nicely central to the hole. Now because we then need to drill this up on edge, we can quite often find that even putting this on its lowest setting and the drill as far up as possible, it still won't quite fit. So I'm going to have to move that out the way, which makes that too deep. So then I've got to have a block of wood to stand that on there to actually put that through so we can drill it. Small workshop problems, eh? Right, there we go. I quite purposefully didn't go all the way through. You can see I've got right to the very end of it. But I didn't go all the way through because there's a chance with the Forstner bit that it catches on the edges and it would kick and jump. So we've got to trim this off anyway. So I'm actually going to use a chisel to square off these edges down here. You can see that's what we did on this one. And then it's no bother to just take that tiny little shim off by doing that at the same time. Apparently I didn't press record for this bit, which is a damn shame, but there we go. We just used a chisel to flatten off the edges down here on both sides, and then just went in with a half round file just to tidy things up a little bit in there and make that work quite nicely. So one last thing to do with this block of wood before it's just usable is on this inside hole, for that to thread in, we need to make sure that we can recess this inside section a little bit, because we need the round edge at the front of that to actually pull this into the back of the wood, because if it sits there, no matter how much I tighten that, that's not going to pull on anything. So we just need to recess this inside section so that this can pull in far enough. Won't get any further in because of that. So I'm just going to get a little half round chisel and see if I can't just make that a little bit wider and deeper using this. So you can see we've just gone in there with some little gouges to create that recess, so when we slot this in, it can sink in far enough that it would actually grip this. The more you pull it, the tighter that's going to get. Now just a really quick run through with a round file, nice and 90 degrees to this flat face. That just gives something for the Allen key to sit in, so it's not going to curve that way at all when you're clamping it in either. And there we go, that's pretty much the woodworking done. Yes, you can shape this any way you want. You might want to make this a nice oval shape. You might want to put some little door knobs on to use as handles. But effectively, that's the woodworking done. That will work as well as this ugly little thing here. Right, so now we've got to think about this blade that we actually need to work on. One of the reasons why we wanted to use the wood first is because then it holds this in the right position to then be ground. So let's get the belt sander out and see if we can start grinding this flat. So fresh new 80 grit sheet on the belt sander, which is clamped into my vise. Allen key clamped into the holder and set deep enough that I can dip it into this bowl of water here. What we don't want to do is let this overheat. This is hardened steel, so if it gets too hot, you're kind of scuppered. So you grind it for a bit, dip it to cool it down, grind it for a bit, and keep doing that. And then I've also got a tiny little spirit level, just to make sure I'm not grinding on a wonky angle anywhere, so that we get a nice flat run. As we go through, I'm just going to grind for now and get rid of most of this, but when we're getting close to depth, I do want to make sure that I'm grinding deeper at this end than I am at this end, to make sure that it's only the very edge of the blade which will touch the wood. It doesn't want to run all the way along. Right, so hopefully you can see there that it slopes back towards the heel a little bit. So I'm just going to quickly flatten off both edges just to make sure that that hexagon bit isn't getting in the way at all. Right, so to set the angle for this, the actual blade we want, I just want it to match what we have for a chisel. Works well enough. So here's one of my chisels. I've got a little slidey thing and I've set it to the same angle as there. I'm not measuring this at all. It's usually in the 20 to 30 degree bracket, somewhere like that. So that's matching what my chisels are. So I can then grind this away and make sure it matches that same angle. So I know that this is just going to work to cut wood. So we could see as the water evaporates, we know it's getting hot enough, and we need to dip it again. We've definitely got down to a nice point. You can kind of tell as you're doing it, because you can see that little line of light along there as the metal started to fold upwards. So we know we've reached that end point. So all we've got to do now is sharpen this properly, like you would do with all the chisels and plane blades, to get rid of those scrape marks in there from that 80 grit paper. And of course that immortal question, does it work? Well, I've cut 2 grooves down here. Let's see, does it take it off? Oh, very nicely. Oh, that's very pleasant. Coming from the other side. Oh. I'd say that works, wouldn't you? So whether you decide to then leave it but ugly, or give it a little bit of care and attention, shape it nicely, make sure it feels nice in your hands, it's got a couple of coats of Danish oil on, there is a router plane that works perfectly well and is completely free. If you like all things hand tools, then make sure you subscribe to this channel. Check out this video here, because I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy it. And until next time, sharpen your tools, or go ahead and make one, and I'll see you soon. God bless.